Every few months I create a video in which I talk extensively and with great enthusiasm about a game created by Knizia. Titles covered previously include Whale Riders, My City, Blue Lagoon, Babylonia, and Llama. Games which have nothing in common other than Knizia being the designer, but surprisingly they all have a very similar color palette, something I had not noticed until I was preparing to talk about today's game, Sumatra, which looks very much like it's part of the pack, but again, has nothing in common with these other games other than the Knizia DNA that runs through them. I think it's funny though. I mean, look at this. Blue Lagoon, Sumatra, they look like they definitely belong together, but they're not the same at all. Now, Sumatra is a game released in 2020 by Spanish publisher Ludonova, which had released Babylonia in 2019 and is now back with another game from Knizia. This game is set on the island of Sumatra. You'll be traveling around the island collecting images of various things in your personal notebook. The Sumatra setting is pretty. It has a hard-to-read typeface, but it doesn't apply to anything in the game, which boils down to you collecting stuff and scoring points. It's very pretty to look at. It's nice to have there, but it's not essential to what you're doing. You could have been anywhere collecting anything to score points. So the setting is a bit of a throwaway, but the game itself is solid and it fits with all the other titles, except maybe My City, in that it has this shared game space that people build together in order to experience. So your actions weigh heavily on what other people can possibly do. Let me show you how this works. Here are some of the components for Sumatra, starting with a double-sided game board, with this side being for 3 to 5 players, the other side being for 2 players, and I'll talk about the 2-player game later. Each player gets a notebook in which you will record the things that you see as you travel around the island. All of the players start in base camp, and I'll assume we have a 5-player game right now. You are joined by the tour guide, represented by this book of knowledge. Hitchhiker's Guide, if you will. You're going to start by turning over 18 of the starting tiles at random into this area of the board that the rule book refers to as the available information area, with the top part of the board being the known information area. And those terms are confusing and not helpful, so instead I will refer to this area as your current location, because you are currently here. This is what you can see. This we'll refer to as other locations, and just keep it simple like that. You put all these tiles out here, and you're going to take turns for the initial part of the game while you're in base camp, just drafting a tile and adding it to your notebook. So for example, you might take a craft, and when you add a tile, generally you put it in the leftmost column, with each space holding generally 1 tile. You see certain locations that can hold up to 3 tiles. This list right here shows you how many tiles are in the bag, which is separate from the tiles that you have to start with. So I may take a craft, 4 other people will take tiles, maybe I take some equipment, and 4 other people will take tiles, and maybe I take a Wi-Fi signal. Again, 4 people take things, and now I'll take a person. Not take a person. I will record the fact that I saw a person. I often refer to all of this as just collecting things, but collecting people is not what you're doing. You are observing and taking notes of who you have seen. So you must draft until all these tiles are gone, and the first time a player cannot draft something, they move up the path. And there's no other tiles, so each other player moves up the path. When you get back to the purple player's turn, if you are ahead of the book, on your turn, you move the book up to join you. You then draw as many tiles from the bag as is shown here. And these tiles number 100. They are square instead of round to help you sort them out at the end of the game. It is a brilliantly simple thing to do. And now the purple player must draft one of these tiles. So take something and adds it to its board. Now you start having choices, and this is the central dynamic of the game. So if the next player to go is pink, they can either take a tile, because they are here with the guide, exploring this current location. They see everything that's here, or maybe they don't like what's here. They say, whatever it is, this isn't for me. I don't want to get it in my notebook for whatever reason. I'm going to just move on ahead on the path, leaving behind everything that's here. Pink doesn't get to take a tile because they are moving ahead of the group, exploring into fresh territory. Okay, pink is done. But maybe gray wants to take a tile, and black wants to take a tile, and then teal decides to go ahead. Purple takes a tile. We get back to pink's turn. Pink pulls the guide up here. Pink has run ahead, and now the guide is going to catch up with pink because pink can't wander off on their own. And because this is no longer the current location, all of these tiles move up into the other location area, and we draw 6 new tiles. And now pink is going to choose one of those. So put out those. Let's say pink takes this. We get back to the next player, gray. Gray is no longer with the group, and gray must catch up with the tour guide, so gray just has to move forward. Same for black. Teal had already moved up, so now teal can take something, and purple has to move up. Now, this is the main dynamic of the game. Pink moved ahead, explored, did not get anything from the current group, but got first shot at what came out of the bag next. So, if, for example, we get back to, I don't know whose turn it is at this point, but gray moves ahead to this spot where we're only going to draw 3 tiles next. But there's 4 tiles left, and each of these people pick a tile. Well, we get back to gray's turn. Gray is ahead. The tour guide moves up to where gray is. We're going to draw only 3 tiles. And gray takes one of them, but everyone else has to move up. And so now gray gets a second shot at what's here. And maybe the next player decides, I'm going to move up. Actually, I think black was the next player. And now black will get first shot at what comes out of the bag here. This movement mechanism boils down to 2 choices. Move and don't take a tile, stay where you are and take a tile. And that's it. What's amazing though is how well this represents the experience of being part of a tour group. Because if you're with the guide, you stay in the current location, they point something out to you, and you take notes on it. Possibly a little unthematic. No one else gets to take notes on that thing because you are hogging it all for yourself. But it makes sense. I'm with the guide. My attention is focused here. I'm going to write down in my notebook. I'm going to draw a sketch of that animal. I interview that person. I take notes on it. I draw on the craft. Whatever it is, that's what I'm doing in that particular space. Or I don't like anything that I see around me, and I just move on. I want to be first to whatever comes next. Don't know what's going to be there. I'll be surprised when those things come out of the bag, but nothing currently here excites me, so I'll just move on. And then the tour guide will follow me, and if the tour guide has already left, well, my choice is only catch up with the group. Otherwise, I'm going to be left behind. I do not want to be that person who is holding back a tour, because I have had that experience once on a tour in Scotland. It was not fun having the guide yell at you. You do not want that to happen. So if you are going to catch up with the group, which means you don't get something, or at least not the ideal thing, from whatever you have just moved on to, because everyone else was there first and now you get to catch up. What's left for me? It's an incredibly simple mechanism, and yet it feels so real. It feels exactly like the tour experience in how you are going to record what you were seeing in your notebook. And the choices of what you want to record, well, that's where you get into scoring points. Let's say that I'm the pink player and I was the first one to move to this location with gray and black following. It's now my turn again. I'm going to move the tour guide to this current location. This tile, anything left behind here, goes to other locations because it's no longer current. And I'm going to pull 8 tiles from the bag and lay those out to show what's available to see and record here. Now, what I want to collect is going to depend on what I have already collected and what other people are collecting. That matters in different ways because you are competing for other people for all sorts of things. For these bonus tiles over here, I'll talk about later, and for certain categories of scoring in the 9 different types of tiles that you can collect. With people, for example, again, not collecting people, recording people that you have seen. Whoever has recorded the most people will score 5 points, and whoever has recorded the fewest will lose 5 points. In addition, for each tile that you can keep in this space at the end of the game, you will score 5 points. So at most, I can score 20 points from people, seeing more than every other player and having 3 in this spot. So 20 points possible total, with -5 being the worst that you can score. Or maybe I want to collect crafts. If you have 1 craft, well, that's worthless. That's terrible. And have 2 is 1 point, and then 5 points, and 10 points, and 20 points if you fill the entire craft area. 20 points for people, 20 points possible for craft, with your scoring for craft being independent of all the other players, although of course if you are collecting crafts, that makes it harder for other people to do so. You have flora and fauna. Okay, well, we got flora. This is only worth 1 point. That is not great. And also, flora and fauna scores as a pair. You actually need to have both spots filled. So if I had this fish here as well, maybe I drafted that earlier at the start of the game. If both spots are filled, then you look at which one has a higher number, and you score that many points. So 1 in this case. That's not good. But if I had somehow taken this orangutan, then I would have 4 points, because that is the higher score. Now, when you collect these tiles, you do not have to fill them in strictly from left to right for the flora and fauna. If I have one in the flora spot here, I can always put a fauna one here. So hopefully later in the game, maybe I can, again, draw a tile from the bag, and I'll get some expensive or valuable animal, and I'll score 4 points instead of the 1. And then maybe later in the game, I'll get this 4-point flora, and now I'll score 4 points there as well. Maximum points you can score for the flora-fauna combination is 24, because there are 2 5s in each type, and there's a 4 in the other type. So you'd have to perfectly have these 10 tiles lined up so that this scores 4, and then this scores 5, and that scores 5, and this scores 5, and so on, to score everything perfectly. But if you have a spot empty, then this doesn't score at all. I get nothing for this because it's not combined. Okay, maybe I don't want that because that's only 1 point. We come to Wi-Fi and GPS. So when you take a GPS, you add it in here, you add Wi-Fi here, and when you get a pair, the two work together because you need both Wi-Fi and GPS to know what you're looking for. And what you do then, as soon as you complete a pair, you go up to the tiles from the past location. Let me return this orangutan here. You go in the tiles up here, and you get to choose one of them, except you can't take GPS and Wi-Fi. You can't just draw more and more of those tiles out of the old locations. But I can take any one of these. So maybe I want to take a different color of equipment, or that 4-point orangutan to hope to pair it up with flora later. Or I can have a person here, someone else to experience, or matching type of equipment, because when you get a color of equipment, you can have at most 3 of them and you stack them up. Let's say I do that. So that's one way the Wi-Fi and GPS pairs are good. Another way is combining them with village tiles, because you need Wi-Fi and GPS to exactly locate where a village is. That's what's important when you're looking back at your notebook later. I have no villages down here. We've got one up here. Now, villages are worth 5 points a tile. However, you must have more Wi-Fi and GPS pairs than villages. You need more signal than actual location in order to score from these locations. So right now, this is worth 0 points for my villages. If I collected another GPS and I collected another Wi-Fi, I would get a bonus tile immediately, and at the end of the game, this would probably be worth 5 points. I say probably for a reason I'll talk about later. Okay, so let's say I chose GPS, I take the animal, and then 2 other people choose something. These 2 come up, it comes down around to my turn again. Maybe I want to take this equipment, and then at some point we're going to move on. Maybe this is the next assortment of tiles. Let's say these stay behind. I move up here, and now we've got these 4 that come out. Well, this spot here is for volcanoes. There are 5 colors of equipment, and there is 1 volcano in each color. So when you take a volcano, it's going to be paired with any equipment that you have. So I have this color, so the volcano would go here. If I take a volcano for equipment that I don't have, let's say I had no blue equipment right now, then I would start this volcano here, and any blue equipment I acquire would go in this spot. So all the color is paired up here. You get the flora fauna pairs, Wi-Fi GPS pairs, and volcano equipment pairing. So let's say I had this, put this back. All right, seeing a volcano is cool, except if I don't have enough equipment. If I don't have 3 pieces of equipment that match the color of the volcano, I lose 5 points. If, however, I do collect 3 pieces of that equipment, and there are 6 of each color in the game, then I will score 5 points for that volcano, and for each 3 equipment that I have there, I get 5 points as well. So for each color, if I collect this goldish color, and I get another goldish color, and I get a third goldish color, that's worth 5 points, regardless of whether I go see the volcano or not. Okay, that was a lot to absorb all at once. You're competing for players. Seeing inhabitants, you're competing against other people. Crafts is all you. Flora and fauna must be a pair. Wi-Fi and GPS don't score anything on their own, but they get you something from the older tiles. Villages score 5 points each, but only if you have more of these pairs. Volcanoes score only if you have 3 of the matching equipment, and the equipment scores if you have 3 equipment, regardless of whether you have the volcano or not. So right now this is negative 5 points. If I collect 1 more equipment of this color, that's 10 points. So that's a nice swing of 15 points. Importantly, so you're going to travel around the board, and when you get to the final spot, you'll draw 10 tiles. You will have drawn all 100 tiles in the bag, so you will have seen everything there, although you will probably not get access to everything because a lot of things will be thrown away into old locations as the tour group moves on. You draft until all of the tiles are gone, and then you are going to score points. However, very importantly, you look and see how many different colors of equipment you have. And in this case, if I end up with only 3 colors of equipment, then any tiles in this 4th and 5th column are thrown away. So it doesn't matter how many people I encounter if I don't have the equipment to support me in those locations. At the end of the game, these would be lost. I would not have the information for them. Similarly, I would lose the crafts. I would lose the flora and fauna. I would lose the Wi-Fi and GPS pairs, which might knock me down, and I have exactly as many villages as pairs, which means my villages are worthless. There's all sorts of bad things that happen, so you really want to get all 5 colors of equipment, if possible, well, depending on what you are trying to collect. Sometimes you can play the game so that only 2 or 3 or 4 columns matter, and you don't need that 5th color. That said, often you want to get that 5th color anyway, and you want to collect other things because of these bonus tiles. The first player to meet one of these conditions, have this particular arrangement of tiles, gets to collect this bonus. If I'm the first player to encounter and record the 3 people, then I take this tile, which is worth 3 points. All of these tiles are worth 3 points. So I get this, that's 3 points. Even if I lose the records of those people later because I don't have enough equipment, doesn't matter. I still keep the 3 points for this tile. Similarly, the first player to have 3 fauna, or 2 crafts and 2 people. 2 crafts and 2 animals, 3 animals, 4 Wi-Fi, 4 GPS, 2 villages, 2 volcanoes? So risky going to 2 volcanoes. However, you get a bonus of 3 tiles, and if you manage to collect all the equipment for those volcanoes, that's a huge amount of points. And all 5 pieces of equipment. You were trying to compete for these bonuses in addition to the actual scoring here. Finally, you have this collection of green tiles where you are only going to be able to claim 1 green tile during the game. When you have tiles in 6 different rows, you could claim this one, and it's worth 3 points. Or you could push on. In this case, I have 7 different types of tiles. I could claim this one for 5 points. Or I could wait, hope to pick up one of these, and let's say I pick up a flora later. I've thrown all my tiles all over the place now. I don't know where anything is at this point. Flora, boom. Now I've got 8 types. I could take this one, or I can hold out and hope to get a village. Or I just take this one, I record it, Okay, I can take no more green tiles, and now someone else cannot take this if they have 8 different types. They need to push on to get 9 types, or they just have to be satisfied taking this one for 5 points. So all the points in the game come from the green tiles, the bonus tiles here for being the first to reach some condition, and the actual points that you collect from your notebook. And there's a quick overview of Sumatra, which I played 8 times in our review copy from Ludonova, twice each with 2, 3, 4, and 5 players. Sumatra feels very much like a Knizia design because the rules are extremely simple. The rulebook, unfortunately, is not. It makes things seem more complicated than they should be, partly due to the references to available information and known information, when both of those feel like they're kind of the same thing. Different terminology works much better, and that's how I explain the game to players, and that's how I would suggest you play it as well. You have tiles in the current location, and you have tiles elsewhere. Just keep it simple, because that's what the game is. The choices behind it are extremely simple. If you are where the tour guide is, you can pick a tile and not move, or you can move forward. If you're behind the tour guide, move forward. Don't take a tile in either case. That's it. The choices feel like nothing, and yet everything is highly player interactive because your choices are driving everything else. Because I want to go ahead, I want to have first choice, or I got to stay behind and get something. Do I want to take the stuff that I know about, or take the chances on what comes in the future? Or maybe there's something I really need in order to complete the equipment that I need for a volcano, or get a GPS so I can grab the tile I need and score my village, or build toward this is crafting. There's all these things pulling you in different directions, and there's not much to the rules. It's all about the dynamics with other players who are driving the game forward. It's really interesting looking at Sumatra, and I see hallmarks of 2 other Knizia designs there. The pace of the game is all under player control, and it really is reminiscent of Ra, because the more that you call auctions in Ra, the faster a round can go, because players are going to play out their bidding tiles. If you hold off, then more tiles are going to come out of the bag, and the game feels very different depending on how things go. So the player count plays a big role in this, because with more players, there tends to be someone who doesn't see what they want, and they just move ahead, and they're going to push the group forward. Although, of course, with more players, you're going to take fewer tiles overall, just because there's more people taking the tiles that come out. Feels very different that way. So there's this raw element of the timing and the pace of the game. How quickly are you going to move ahead, which is the faster you go, the more tiles in general get thrown into the other location and are generally out of play, except through the Wi-Fi and GPS pairs. So that's an interesting element that comes into it. Another game that Sumatra reminds me of, strangely, possibly, is Traumfabrik, or Dream Factory. Both Ra and Traumfabrik are auction games. Sumatra is not, but the Traumfabrik element comes into play mostly because of the feeling of you trying to complete certain elements in your notebook. You are looking for people, you are looking for craft, you have these particular desires that you are trying to mark off in order to score and maximize or grab a bonus or whatever it is you're trying to do. And Traumfabrik has this timing element as well, where you are trying to make movies and you need certain tiles to complete a movie, whether it's an actor or a director or a script or whatever it is. It's been a while since I played Traumfabrik. But you're trying to complete these certain things, and you see all the tiles that are available in a year. So you are trying to time your attack, your bidding, to get certain things very consciously. You are planning ahead as you look at what you're collecting over the course of the year, what's possibly of interest to you, and time it just right. And it feels very much like that in Sumatra, where the tiles are laid out, and you know immediately, oh, I got to move ahead. I'm looking for something in particular. I want this volcano. I want this. I need this equipment. I need this 5th type. Whatever it is you're trying to do, you're striking out to try to get first grab at something. You don't know whether it's coming out of the bag, but if you're not there first and you suspect someone else is going to take it, it feels terrible. And so you've got this great tension, again, all driven by the simple action of staying with the group or moving ahead, with everyone fighting for certain tiles. It's so simple and yet works beautifully. One player has been in all 8 of my games. We played 2-player, and he played in all the other ones. Initially, he said, I wasn't really sure about this game, but he said it's kind of amazing that it's grown on me over time. And that's what a lot of Knizia games do, is that they feel like nothing. And yet the more you play, the more you see how your actions affect other people, and you can kind of respond, and you're playing the odds of what's coming up at particular times, gambling at certain moments, trying to get certain things. The experience plays into all other games that you play from Knizia, but in all the first game of Sumatra plays into all the other ones, because you get a sense of the pace of the game and what you're collecting and how things can build over time, what's possible to get and what's good. You need that first game of experience to get a sense of what you can possibly do. You can't get everything, but what can you get done? I feel like I want to say more, but I also feel like I've said enough. The game is simple and straightforward. Let me talk about the 2-player game. We get on to a different path. The rules for Sumatra change in 2 ways based on the player count. With 3 players, you are going to use this side of the board that I already showed you. Everyone starts in base camp, as I described previously. However, you reveal only 5 of these starting tiles instead of 18. All the other tiles stay up above in the other locations area, which means you are going to start with 1 or 2 tiles in your notebook, and that's it. Many fewer than in a 4- and 5-player game. The Wi-Fi and GPS becomes more important because there's more stuff up here to try to complete whatever it is that you're doing. However, you still go through all 100 tiles in the bag. With the 2-player side of the game board, you're going to start with 5 tiles, so you'll have 2 or 3 to start with in your notebook. However, all the numbers on the path are smaller, by 1 to 3 compared to the other side of the board. So instead of going through all 100 tiles, you are going to go through 79 of the tiles, which means you don't know exactly what's going to come into play in any particular game. Maybe you'll never see a volcano of a certain color, or an equipment of a certain color will be short, or just GPS don't come out to match up with the Wi-Fi. Or the people just aren't there. The people become very important in a 2-player game because it's effectively a 10-point swing. If I have more than you, I earn 5 points, you lose 5 points. If you tie me, we've now eliminated that difference. If you jump ahead of me, now the 10 points is going in your direction. It's incredibly important, but there's real mystery as to how many people you actually are going to see over the course of the entire game. So the game changes a lot just because of the variability of the tiles available to you. And this is kind of the difference here. The Trump Fabrique comparison breaks down, although I've never played Trump Fabrique with 2 because I just can't imagine it working well. With Trump Fabrique, all the tiles are coming out over the course of the 4 years of the game. With the 3 to 5 players in Sumatra, you are going to, again, see all of the tiles available to you. You can count everything that you've seen come out and everything that you've seen get shifted to the other location area, and you know that there's still blue equipment in the bag that you can possibly get for the volcano that you're trying to score, and you might push ahead so that you can be first and ensure that you get that blue tile and someone else won't take it away from you. With 2 players, you don't have that assurance. You are gambling much more effectively as like another player is taking those tiles away. You are just not going to see them. It's a much tighter fight on the board as well, because if we're in the same spot and I move ahead, well, if you don't move up, I'm going to get the first 2 picks out of whatever comes here. What's available left in this spot that you want? And you have that dynamic over and over again. If I come here and you don't move up, I'm going to take both of these 2 tiles, or possibly I take 1 and then I move up. And now you're chasing me the whole time. You're much more compact because there's only 2 of you. You don't have someone behind and someone possibly moving ahead with other people in this current location as you do with usually 4 or 5 players. It feels much tighter as you're going around the board, and again, because of the variability in what's available, it's a lot more tense in a different way. As I mentioned, I played Sumatra 8 times now, and it feels like 8 is enough to actually talk about the game. And it's weird because, of course, you never know exactly what's the right number of times to play a game before you can talk about it, but it's good because I've had enough experience that I see lots of different things happen. Partly with the different player counts, playing twice each with each player count gives you a feel for how the scores work, how things get divided up. The points totals definitely drop in a 5-player game just because you're getting fewer points. You more hyper-specialize in certain things because you just can't do as much as you would in a 3-player game. So your focus changes that way. In addition, you get to see different things win. It might initially seem like you just worry about people because you want to maximize those people. You get the 5 points for having the most. You get 15 more if you fill that last slot. I got to get the equipment, make sure I max that out as well, so I actually keep those people. That seems like an awesome thing to do. Oh wait, but crafts are also good. Oh wait, but also getting lots of equipment is good. Oh wait, I can just get 3 things of equipment and I can maximize everything else to score a lot that way. It's interesting to see the variety of things that work, and again, a lot of it is driven just by what everyone else is doing. You kind of have to find your spot at the table, and eventually as the game proceeds, you start looking for very specific tiles. But at the beginning, you kind of draft a few and you just see, okay, well, he's doing animals. I'm not going to worry about animals. I don't want to be behind the animal player also taking animals because I'm less likely to get those bonuses. Except, of course, if I move ahead down the path first, and then I get first shot at it. So the table does not necessarily dictate what's going to happen to you, but it's often your aggressiveness in how you are moving down the path and how you are advancing in the course of the game and the number of tiles that people actually see because you just move on when things are left behind. Instead of taking some middling thing, you just... I've talked about this a lot. I've already covered this. I've covered all the ground. I think I've talked about it all. Maybe you get a sense that I like it. I don't know. It's just this standard Knizia. Standard meaning incredibly well designed with minimalistic rules that's highly player interactive and player dependent as you go in this shared game space. This is all this stuff that I really love and I'm excited to see. And maybe in the future I can talk about other blue Knizia games like Meow, which I've only played once. Right now I'm in the, is this really how this is supposed to work? Which often happens with Knizia games the first time you play them, where you feel like, is this it? That's all there is? So, need a few more plays on that. Aristocracy, which I've played 4 or 5 times now, but not with 4 players yet. And I want that experience, because again, the player counts matter. Everything matters with Knizia games. Where's Llama? Llama, I did 17 minutes talking about Llama. That's like the amount of time it takes to play Llama, because again, the 2-player is different than the 3 and the 4 and the 5 and the 6. It's amazing how good Knizia is at what he does, and you just get to see it again with yet another design with 30 years of design experience. I guess he knows what he's doing.